Hey Minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of King of the Hill, I want to talk about Maui of the Polynesian Voyagers. Maui is another hybrid King Minion with the one-shot ability to bring up to 2 bases into play and a talent to move a minion to a base where you have no minions. For this video, I have to be brutally honest. I am categorically opposed to this faction strategy. It wore out for me quickly. There are great players that I trust who like them a lot, and that's okay, but I am not a fan of the Polynesian Voyagers. For this video, it's going to feel like Maui isn't even the main character, and that's kind of the point. He is one of the most disappointing King Minions in the game of recent memory. The Polynesian Voyagers want to have minions on many bases, and they do that by increasing the number of bases. Maui can add up to 2. Volcanic Uprising can add 1, Island Chain can add another. In a 4-player game, you're already up to 9, and with any form of recursion, you can spam Maui to add more and more, easily crossing double digits, and members of my group have done this just to cause chaos and spite me. I once literally lost a game because I simply couldn't keep track of every base that was in play because there was an insane amount. And the bulk of Maui's ability is tied into that one-shot. Once you look at a base, you have to put it into play. You can look at the bases one at a time. You do not need to declare that you will look at 2 bases before you look at the first. But the talent is something you probably weren't expecting. Moving a minion to a base where you have no minions. This goes against every typical movement strategy where you want to consolidate your minions. The Polynesian Voyagers have a lot of movement, but it's restricted to this clause, which just doesn't make any sense to me because once they get there, they are pretty much stuck. And Maui can do this repeatedly. Their only pure movement card is Ocean Tattoo, but that's 1 copy and can be pretty hard to play unless you go first or create a new base. You need to be the only minion on that base other than monsters. And using Maui just so that you can play Ocean Tattoo is really overkill, and it forces you to wait on one of your best cards. To talk about Maui is to talk about the general concept of the Polynesian payoff. Spreading minions out to new bases. Why are we doing this? You might move your sole minion on one base to another. That doesn't accomplish much. Moving a minion where you have many so that it can be by yourself makes less sense because you are going down in power, and generically moving a minion or moving one of your own minions is objectively better. And with this restriction, another player can disable your ability entirely by moving them themselves and spreading you out. Which is why the Polynesian Voyagers want to add more bases, but this is only a necessity because of the strange clause anyway. However, there are 2 payoffs. The first is Knowledge of the Tribes, which is somewhat like the polar opposite of Tech Center. Instead of minions you have on one base, it's the bases that you have one of your minions. Given that the Polynesian Voyagers have very little extra plays, this is really hard to set up, and not worth it in my opinion. The second is Unity of the Tribes, which gives you, the player, 2 power for each base where you have a minion. This is one of the problems that I have with Maui. Unity of the Tribes can actually work, and I feel like this makes Maui look like he was successful in that plan. I feel like the Polynesian Voyagers are carried by a few key cards, this being one of them, that make up for the shortcomings of everyone else. I feel like they are much stronger, easier to facilitate actions in the game. Super Future Space Armor Power gives you the same power, if not more, and lets you keep the same power on the base. Each minion should provide at least 2 power, which Adventure Power or any other mass movement card can create. But what Unity of the Tribes does is allow those minions to remain in play to be used for their power on other bases, which theoretically is good. But with the lack of overall free movement in this faction, they are stuck there, and Maui doesn't solve that problem. He just creates it. You know what else is stuck in play? Those 2 extra bases he brought in. When you look at the other Polynesian minions, there isn't really a match with Maui's ability. Maui seems like a match, but with Unity of the Tribes, you are actually going down in power. If you just played that minion there on a future turn, you'd accomplish the same thing. Tiki is a minion that is supposed to spike in power after an action is played, which again doesn't make sense to send into a new base. Wayfinder is very strong, But why use Maui to do it when Wayfinder can do it herself? Unless there was an incentive to move her multiple times, it doesn't really make any sense. And Maui definitely won't move himself because you are taking your highest printed power out of the equation. Even with bad king minions, you at least get the printed power as part of a big drop, so why forfeit even that? Again, orchestrating all of this just to play Ocean Tattoo is really overkill, and as you'll see on Friday, you may not really want to play Ocean Tattoo on that minion anyway. In reality, a lot of what Maui does is just move one of your minions to be the first minion on a base so that you can play your regular card there and try to compete. And I would argue, and have argued in the past, that Maui actually hurts this goal because it means that the Wayfinder, who can grow to be really strong, cannot actually move there. You only get to meet that criteria once, so why waste it on a subpar minion? And if you pick the Wayfinder, then the talent is meaningless on the last turn, and you'd be forfeiting the power counter. I think Maui's ineffectiveness is the reason why the Polynesian Voyager results are polarizing to me. I've seen them be strong on the strength of a few key cards. I've seen them be incredibly weak as well. Maui doesn't really seem to be a contributor. It's funny, a common response after a game is over is that someone in our group will say, "I never saw X," where X is a key card for the faction. It's true. Games are often driven by what you draw and who draws the better cards. But not once did anyone ever say, "I never drew Maui," because he just doesn't make the impact that the faction needs. To illustrate the talent's weaknesses, consider these two facts. There aren't many minions where they actually want to be the only minion on a base. The one that comes to mind is Ronin, and if you are moving at least 2 power to another base just so that you could play a Ronin to gain a power counter, that doesn't seem like a fair trade. And why not just play Ronin on the other base? I actually find Ronin pretty disappointing overall, and this doesn't make it better. The second point is that such a move is something opponents want to do to other players. So how could it be considered good to do to yourself? It's hard to think of a case where Monster Tornado's talent isn't better. Even if you use the talent, you won't be using it often because it doesn't help you directly compete on a base. And faster factions can just blitzkrieg you while you struggle to keep up. Instead, this faction really needs synergy in order to fill the void created by Maui. Pairing them with a faction that has actual unrestricted movement is very powerful because of their ability to avoid power creep. When I think about king minions, I often think of the mild-mannered citizen, and Maui just isn't one worth grabbing. And no, Eric, spamming Maui just to confuse and irritate me so that I make a mistake or have a stroke is not a viable strategy. The one case where I do see a benefit is that Maui can trigger up to 2 crypt looters, which actually does play into the unity of the tribe strategy. It does violate the talent, but at least the explorers have the movement to make use of the extra plays. This is an easy guaranteed Ocean Tattoo play because it can all happen in one turn while facilitating the extra plays, but Wayfinder is a much better Ocean Tattoo candidate, and this is one combination out of 2,700. The only way that this amounts to a big play is in the extreme surprise attack play, similar to Idaho Smith. But the Polynesian Voyagers aren't equipped to handle this like Idaho Smith is, and I have never seen this pulled off successfully. Unfortunately, this is a disappointing minion for me, and the Wayfinders definitely carry the faction. Friday's video will cover an action that makes up for their deficiencies, but I'd love to see your comments on your perception now and after Friday, so let me know in the comments. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.